When you're out there, a whole feeling, very spiritual, takes over from there, and you just give into it. It's the only time I have that particular feeling is when I'm out in the river. I dream about it sometimes. I just wish more people could experience it. What brought me to the Wekiva River is my canoeing. I brought a canoe from Hawaii, had it shipped. That's what we did in those days. We just took our kayaks and canoes with us. Nobody thought about buying a new one. And I immediately started looking for a place to use it. And I found the Wekiva, fell in love with it, of course. Katie's Landing came about by accident. It was an old fishing camp called Camp Seminole. I love those old Florida fishing camps, but I wanted something different. I wanted to introduce canoeing and kayaking and the kind of camping, like tent camping with bonfires right alongside the Wekiva. I thought that would really be cool, and I did introduce all of those. The Wekiva was a much wilder place years ago, 55 years ago, and before that. It had 42 squatters' shacks on it. They were a wild group, and they didn't want people using the river. They found out that people were discovering them, and I was responsible for that by getting people out on the river, and the squatters resented that greatly. And so they recognized me, and they did used to shoot over my head. And Deborah Shelley, who was the director at that time, oversaw the removal of those, which was really an interesting, harrowing task.
We would be followed by, if you put in at a certain marina, back then everyone had walkie-talkies, so they would say, the state people are out there and they're looking. So everybody, get in their boats, and they'd be taking pictures of us when we would be taking pictures of the cabins. Mm-hmm. So the state determined in court that the cabins were on state-owned conservation lands, and that private use of the islands was preventing the use of the islands by the public. And there were numerous other violations, like illegal wells, makeshift bathroom facilities, sinks that drained to the river, boat traffic, and boat traffic was causing a scarring of submerged grasses, so there was several concerns. So the removal of the cabins set the stage for the river to be designated in the year 2000 as a wild and scenic river because its scenic beauty was restored. So the Wekiva River is formally described as the Wekiva River, Little Wekiva River, Blackwater Creek, Rock Springs Run, Sulphur Run, and Seminole Creek. All those systems make up the Wekiva. There's a variety of attributes that a river system has to have in order for it to qualify for the Wild and Scenic River System. And the Wekiva River System has 5 outstanding remarkable values. The first one is its scenic beauty. The second one is its value as a recreational resource. The third one, it supports significant wildlife and habitat. The fourth one, it has important historic and cultural resources. And the fifth outstanding remarkable value is the river's water quality and water quantity.
There's no better way to spend an afternoon than out here with a paintbrush and just trying to capture some of it. And honestly, I'm not a painter. I'm not a good painter. I just think it's fun. I think the painting the river kind of brings you back to finding that peace, that little nook, that little place that you find is exquisite. This is such a remarkable place, and there's really no place that can compare. You get in the kayak and head downstream and see some of the most pristine wild Florida you paddle upstream, less than half a mile, and you actually can see one of these spring heads. And on a clear, day with good light reflection, you can actually see into the cavern of the spring and the bubbling water that comes up. And it just, it's magical. I highly recommend that people come to the river and just sit and listen and watch and listen to the birds and watch the river roll by and feel the vibration, meditate, hum, sing, dance. It's all about giving thanks for being alive, and you really feel being alive when you're outside.
I like to do, wildlife photography, so any chance I can to observe wildlife and just see what they're doing and get unique pictures. When you come to Florida, especially not really being too familiar with the natural systems, I didn't really expect the diversity that is found pretty much everywhere throughout Florida in every habitat and ecosystem. There's a huge amount of diversity. We get a huge amount of migrating bird species that come through. Of course, seeing any of your charismatic big animals is always fun. It's always fun to see the deer that are actually grazing in the river, standing belly deep in the water. And otters, seeing the alligators basking, and then, of course, seeing turtles and all the vegetation and everything. It's just amazing. It makes you feel like you've been transported to some distant locale when you're right here in Central Florida. Yeah, I think being able to come out and be this close to a variety of species is pretty unique. So if you do come out and you want to swim at Kelly Park or at the Wekiva Springs State Park, you can put on a snorkel and a mask, and who knows what you'll see when you go under the water. Wildlife in that area is pretty used to seeing humans, so they kind of go about their business, maybe kind of keep to themselves a little bit more during open hours, but they're around, so you probably run into fish and turtles and all sorts of other animals when you're under the water. I think people are amazed that this exists in Central Florida, and that if they haven't heard of it before, they're surprised they haven't heard of it, and if they have heard of it before, they're kind of wondering why they hadn't come out sooner and explored it.
For me, I like to paddle in the summer and hike in the winter. So I have hiked virtually every trail in all of the parks and paddled every part of the stretch of the 41-mile Wild and Scenic River. When we moved here about 35 years ago to Central Florida, it was, of course, something that everybody knew about. So shortly after we moved here, we began to recreate on the river like everybody else was. Someone with little or no outdoor experience actually has lots of opportunities in the Wekiva system, and some of this is because of the fact that it's been a park for so long. There is tubing, canoeing, boat rental to a certain degree. There's not as much of that as there used to be. You can do a shuttle to canoe Rock Springs Run, Wekiva Springs Run, the Wekiva River. You can go all the way to the St. Johns River. And if you paddle Rock Springs Run now, there's a sufficient flow and extremely clear water in what feels like you're paddling through a wilderness. It is a fantastic experience. On top of the things that you do in or associated with the river, there are dozens of miles of hiking trails that take you close to the river, through the sandhills, through the scrub habitats on numerous different parks that are managed by either Seminole State Forest or the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And I think this question of what is a responsible user is to come here recognizing sort of the sanctity of this system, so that your recreation is one that embraces the natural systems, and that's a part of what you're hoping to to gain by your experience here. You protect what you love, and you love what you've experienced. I want people to come out here, have the experience, get an attachment to the natural resources of the Wekiva, and then make sure that everything that happens in the decades to come, whether it's water quality, water quantity, legislation in Tallahassee, all of that is for the good of the Wekiva system.
Most kids go through a bug phase. I didn't grow out of mine. To me, the benthic macroinvertebrates in a aquatic environment, like a river, like the Wekiva River, they're a really key part of the aquatic ecosystem. They've been used for decades as water quality indicators. In 2005, I was hired by the St. Johns River Water Management District to supervise projects on the Wekiva to help better protect the river's water quality. So the urban and suburban development that's occurred in this area over the past decades was introducing this nitrogen compound, nitrate, to the groundwater, and it was coming out into the Wekiva via the springs. It's fertilizing lawns, it's septic tanks. There is some agriculture, you know, the container nurseries and such. But all of these have been identified as these sources of nitrogen to the groundwater, and it moves through the aquifer system and comes out in the springs. And when it gets into the water, it can act as a fertilizer to cause the undesirable growth of things like algae and aquatic weeds. How can the river look like it does? It looks like a gorgeous river, which I think it is, and yet be a threatened river. It's those things that we can't see, the changes in water quality. Like I say, the nitrate, you can't smell it or see it or taste it, but it causes undesirable effects in the river. There's also a lot of concern about pumping too much water out of the ground, affecting the flow of the springs and the flow of the river. The main source of our water for drinking, for public water utilities, as well as for irrigating our crops, is a groundwater resource called the Floridan Aquifer System. But the aquifer is not limitless, you know, unlimited. It does have limits. I think it would be a very, very helpful if more folks, you know, treated water as a valuable resource. You know, collectively, if everyone were to cut back their water use, that would mean less water pumped out of the ground and more water that would go to the springs.
I think with growth comes problems that have to be managed or mitigated. I would say the threats to the Wekiva River are primarily threefold. Habitat destruction, water quality, and water quantity.
You may be able to resolve one or two issues, but if you have 10 different threats that converge on the system at the same time, and those threats intensify, that could be very devastating to the system.
When you get right down to it, this river is only one out of 2 wild and scenic rivers in Florida. Part of our responsibility as good human beings is to preserve and to give back to nature.
Well, the river is life. It's, you know, it has been flowing through this part of Central Florida for many, many hundreds of years, and the river has seen everything. If you live in Central Florida and you turn on your tap, your water is coming from the same place that the spring water in our rivers originates. So everything is connected. Even if you think you're removed, if you live here, your water is spring water. So we're all involved and invested, whether we think we are or not.
I think there's so many people like myself who lived along the river for, 15 years or more and didn't really understand the importance of preserving it. If we don't take care of it, it it's going to disappear.
To get involved with the Wekiva River, I think the best thing is to join some of the groups working on its conservation. That would include the Friends of the Wekiva River, the Citizen Support Organization for Wekiva Springs State Park.
But you might also join Audubon or Sierra Club, or write your state legislator about issues that you know are of concern.
Volunteers are our lifeblood. They are critical for everything we do. You know, I think people come to us and they think, well, I don't have a special skill or a degree, but you don't need to have a degree to, volunteer your time or your specialty. I want people to know that, you are innately involved in the habitat and ecosystem that you live or visit. So I'd just like people to be involved purposefully. So whether that means getting yourself educated about river issues, or monitoring your water use, or replacing one plant in your yard with a native plant, or taking your kids to see the river, or taking them to a restoration or a cleanup event. I think we feel disconnected somehow, and we've been told that we're maybe disconnected from nature, but I would say that that is not true, that we're all connected, because I think that we all have an impact on each other and on nature, intentionally or not intentionally. So if you can make that intentional to have a positive impact, then all the better.
I think that the Wekiva River Basin needs protection all the time. You have to be constantly vigilant. You have to be such a good steward that you better not wear out, because look what's happened to it under a lot of people's watch. It needs our insightful stewardship and caring for it and maintaining it. Well, maintaining probably is out of the question now. We need to save it. The more people that see it and are exposed to it and get to enjoy it and love it, like most of us do, you fall in love with it and you want to care for it. And the more people that are going to care for it, the better off we're going to be.
Sister's pottery made for me, building a home like I've never known. Been a long time coming since your way to of gold and green, drawn pride with the windows down, planning new trips, dreaming new dreams. It's been a since your way